Greetings. Welcome to ITR Live. I'm your host, Chris Hagan, and we are back here in Studio 130 for another fun-filled, action-packed episode of the gold standard in Iowa conservative entertainment. I get better at that, and then I think I got it nailed, and I just stumble all over it. But anyway, apologies to the listeners out there. One, for my fumbled intro, but also for we're back after a week off, so I know there's a lot of folks out there that really missed us a lot.
They did.
But
thankfully, there's probably other stuff in the news cycle they could pay attention to.
Hopefully we can pivot off of this real quick. But I'm here in studio with Chris Ingstead, and we've got, I'd like to tell you we've got a lot to cover today, but we'll find out whether we have a lot to cover today as we move through this. We have promised ourselves this will be a freewheeling episode.
We're getting away from the highly structured format that we normally follow.
Good. Okay. First of all, I think we need to get back to our regular feature here, which is the construction update.
I thought it might be what did John get in the mail?
No. Well, we haven't. John, as folks have noticed, John's been out lately. We need to get him back in here as soon as we can. But John, the mail has continued, and there'll be a grand opening when we get John back in here. Just to be like Christmas and just present after present. But the construction continues. This morning, I thought it was coming in on a Monday morning was nice to be greeted to classic rock. So as they're working along on the other side of a half-inch drywall, which is blaring classic rock.
I heard "Rock You Like a Hurricane" coming through, from their construction site through your office into mine. And I thought, boy, Chris must be digging it. Yeah. Big Scorpions fan over there.
We come in after a holiday weekend and try and kind of slow run up to the day, and no, we're going in pedal to metal.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Well, great. So I don't think there's any end in sight here, and we'll continue to monitor the progress. Okay. One piece of housekeeping information we have, which I think is actually in the field right now, but the next edition of the ITR Foundation poll, which we haven't, I think the last one we did was in February.
Yeah.
So it'll be really interesting to see what's in there, because there's really been nothing new in the news lately.
No, I'm sure it'll just be rerunning the same old thing. Nothing for anybody to have an opinion on. So
well, and if I'm not mistaken, look, we won't see results for a few days to a week, but this will be the first look at the presidential race in Iowa since the debate.
Oh, so maybe there will be something worth paying attention to.
Now, I also have been going back and forth with our pollster, with our friends at Signal, saying I hope that the matchup that we have that we're testing is actually still the matchup.
That's right.
by the time we get it. So we'll be measuring Trump-Biden, but I suspect that's where we'll be. We're going to touch on that later. I want to come back to the president, but I want folks to know that that's coming. And we have some new issues that we're testing in there, and the usual image ratings, ballot tests, generic congressional ballot, and are things in Iowa as strong for conservatives and Republicans as they have been in the last few times we've polled. So
I think is important about those different, frankly, horse race questions or image questions. Our family of organizations does not get heavily involved in elections. Certainly not at elections at all levels.
Right.
But I think the results of those stand in as a good proxy for how voters feel about certain issues, and just whether they, in general, want the country or our state to take a track that's more conservative than where we are right now, or if they're looking to lean left. And if memory serves, most of those poll responses over the past few years we've been doing this have continued to point that Iowans want things to go in a more conservative direction.
I think that's right, and interestingly, they support conservative fiscal policies even more than they often support Republican candidates.
Yes.
So we will see, say, for example, do you want your property taxes to be lower or higher or just about the same? Well, that crosses party lines. And so I think it's just important to note that those are the issues that we talk about here on the podcast are often very much not just winning issues, but overwhelmingly winning issues with the people of Iowa.
Right.
So good. Well, I think this is a place not necessarily the order that I had mapped this out in, but as we said, we are going to be freewheeling. But one of the issues that we are going to be asking Iowans their opinion of is the idea. Well, we're taking it to another level on property taxes. We've sort of generically asked the question, do you think your property taxes are too high or not? Well, that's an easy one to answer for most.
Right.
But we're asking more specifically, would you support a 2% cap on how much property taxes can go up in a year at the local level?
Right.
And so this is something that the foundation's actually written on.
Yep.
And hopefully our folks have seen some of this, but I'm going to let you talk about what that really means and what it is we're trying to get at.
Iowans are still mad about their property taxes, feel that they're overtaxed, and that those go up. It gets too expensive year over year, right? Every year the bill gets bigger and bigger, grows faster than it should. That's how Iowans feel.
Right.
The legislature, twice in the past 6 years or so, has taken a pretty good stab at passing property tax reforms that are focused on trying to rein in the growth and trying to add a lot of transparency to the issue and trying to provide opportunities for citizens to voice their concerns. So we've had 2 good rounds of property tax reforms, and yet, back to the first point I made, property taxes are still too expensive for way too many Iowans, and they're growing too quickly. So it's not actually rocket science, the solution here. Just put a cap on the growth. In other words, they've done lots of good things that would seem to rein property taxes in, but local governments have found a path to navigate those changes to still keep those bills going up and up and up. So let's just cap how much they can collect. Right. Just cap the growth of property taxes at 2%. Because, Chris, we at the foundation, we do actually do foundation-y things. Mm-hmm. We don't just come and give the gold standard of conservative entertainment.
The think part of think tank.
Right. I mean, you and I don't do it, but we have really talented people who do.
People
right.
On it. Yeah.
And cities and counties grew about 6 to 7% collectively. Not every one of them, but this also means some grew more. 6 to 7% more in property taxes year over year. So the bills that we'll start receiving next month will show statewide a 6 to 7% increase in the cities and counties. And the schools weren't far behind; they were just shy of 6%. And so, despite these reforms, this is where we're at. Let's just put a cap on there and be done with it. And for all the complaining that local governments will do about what they want to spend money on, in a sense, I mean this a little more kindly as it sound, I don't care.
Right.
Because their focus should not be, or the thing that drives their budget should not be what they want to spend money on or what they think their expenses are going to be. It should be on their taxpayers' ability to pay. Right? Because there are so many things that we can't control, Chris. We can't control the price at the pump or the grocery store. In Iowa, we can't control what we've got to pay for homeowners insurance in the face of all these storms. Yep. Right? So government can't just turn and take way more than the rest. I mean, Chris, do you think most of our listeners are counting on a 6 or 7% cost of living increase next year at their job?
I am.
Okay, good. Noted. But I think for most Iowans, that's not realistic either. So why?
Right.
Are we okay with letting local governments grow faster than the bottom lines of Iowa families or businesses?
Let me try this from a different angle. Why is it?
Just stop there.
Right.
Okay.
Well, you work hard. You go to work. You work hard. You produce. Why does government get the first crack at it? And why do you have to worry about making do with whatever's left over after government gets theirs? It's a mindset.
And Chris, property taxes are very much a "what have you done for me lately" proposition, because we get, cost of everything goes up year after year, and we've got to find a way to make it work, right? Yep. And so for local governments, some of them, by the way, Dallas County is the worst, most painful property tax, at least of the counties in the state. They're going to come in with a 25% increase in their property tax collection. So the average homeowner, that's probably a 15% increase in their bill. We've got to now navigate that big increase within everything else in our budget, and that is wild and it's unfair.
Right. Come back to a point that we have made many times, but I think it's important in this context. The state legislature has limited spending to, I think, an average of at least the last few years, I think a little bit less than 3% a year in spending growth. Now, this last year was a little bit more. They did some okay. But roughly, let's call the historical average around 3% in spending growth, which is kind of in the sweet spot and all that, and it's certainly under how much state revenues have grown.
Mm-hmm.
But the locals aren't burdened by that. They continue to grow at a much faster, double the rate that the state budget is growing.
Right.
Comes back to the question of why. Why does their budget need to grow so much more than the state budget?
Why does it get to grow so much faster than the people who are paying the bills?
Right. Why? And why do they get away with the argument that, well, things just cost more, so we have to? Well, no, they don't. You get to control what you spend your money on.
That's
now,
right.
your inputs, you may have to spend more for rock. You may have to spend more on your employee benefits. Sure. And so do Iowans.
But also, what have you spent money along? Yeah. What have you spent money on along the way that has crowded out the opportunity for you to pay for that? Right. We heard a local school official in Mount Pleasant talking about the bus barn. The bus barn is so outdated they can't even park their buses in there anymore. Right. Okay, but what have you spent money on, and what does your expense structure look like that you can't afford that thing? I'm curious.
Well, back here in Dallas County, it was bike trails.
Yeah.
We made a bit. We went out there. Well, we made a big commitment to the bike trails, and that was one of the. Okay, but that's a decision point. Right. Don't tell me that your hands are tied, and you just got to go back to the taxpayers with the 25% increase because your hands were tied. You had to put in a bike trail. Right. I mean, you made the decision, and that. So anyway,
I think that the one warning in this, Chris, is as we hopefully put a cap on how much local governments can grow. And again, please listen, everybody. Yeah. We're talking even in our solution that the locals will cry about. We're still allowing them to grow, right? Just slowing down the growth and capping how much more they can get.
And our policy solutions have always been about slowing the growth.
That's right.
Now because of the way the legislature has done this the last couple of years, there have been counties, because of the way they fell into this complicated mix, that have been negatively impacted by it. I don't deny that that's happening, but I think it feeds into why we are looking at it from this angle, and it's also part of why I was making the point of comparing it to the state budget. Is that the reason we need a cap is because the smaller fixes aren't fixing the problem.
That's right.
And that's why we have to attack this with a broader brush than what we've had.
The caveat that I was trying to make is, as we cap them, that needs to be a cap, hard stop, not a cap on the property tax growth, and then meanwhile the state's general fund subsidizes their spending growth or fills it in, right?
Yeah.
One, that's foolish to take money from one source to just subsidize another like that. But two, the state has done some really good things, some really pro-taxpayer things, and if they want to keep moving on tax cuts or other items like that, the state budget is not going to be able to take money to just fund and subsidize local, right? So if you want all the good work at the state to come to a screeching halt, then take state level dollars and send them to local governments to keep spending.
That's right. And simply put, if you are shifting to a different tax type, it's not a tax cut.
Right.
It's a tax shift. So don't call it that.
Right.
Now, if you decide that your preferred piece of tax policy is more paid here or there, I mean, fine. But don't take that back to the voters and call it a tax cut. No. It's not. So, okay, well, we are going to come back to this idea of capping property taxes because we are supportive of anything that gets us to slower growth in property taxes. Right. But we do also strongly believe that it's time to take more serious measures towards reducing the growth because of these numbers of 6 to 7% a year, even after 2 reform bills that were still growing at 6 to 7%. This is a lot like when we were back and the state picked up the county mental health levy and half of the states just blew right through it. Is these smaller reforms aren't getting the job done, it's time to do even more. Great.
So just a little, we teased the poll coming. We're about done with a property tax pain index that will show just how painful your local governments across the state are making your property tax bill. That'll be out soon. I'm sure we'll talk about it.
Well, and we've
once
gotten
it's live.
We've gotten a lot of good feedback over some of those the graphics that we're able to put out, and folks can actually kind of hover over it and see where their county comes out on that. And so, we're really looking forward to getting that report out as well. Okay. One more piece of Iowa news, and I don't know that it's just because I kind of skipped order, but State Senator Waylon Brown, did you see this, is resigning just a month after his primary win, which was probably the highest profile primary at the legislative level. So there's just the timing is strange on that. Yeah,
Waylon Brown has been a really good legislator since I think he came in that 2016 election. If I'm remembering correctly.
I think that's right.
2017 would have been his first year, I believe. He'd been good on a number of issues, of issues that are really important to our organizations. So
my understanding is he's gotten a new job. I'm not sure what it is. It's not in the pipeline industry. I do have that on good authority, but it is somewhere around agribusiness, renewables, and so we wish Senator Brown well, but it is definitely odd timing, and I suspect we will see that Doug Campbell, who ran against him in the primary, would seem to be the favorite to win the nomination now. And the way that works is you have a nominating convention that reconvenes, and then the party folks get to pick the nominee. And we've had that happen. It seems every cycle there's at least a couple of these seats that happens this way. So that's coming up too. The other thing that we talked about at length in pre-production, and this is another issue that I said at the outset we're going to test, is the presidential horse race in Iowa. And so the ITR Foundation poll is going to ask the question, which we've had, I think, on every iteration of the poll since we've started it. Maybe not the very first one, but Trump or Biden.
Yeah.
And what, where are you at? Go ahead.
Do you think most of our listeners are aware of the trouble like the president had during the debate and then the fallout since? Yeah. We don't need to recap that. Okay.
Well, no, we're going to recap it.
Oh, okay.
But just for reference, when the Des Moines Register polled this, before the debate, it was a plus 18. No, it wasn't. That was generic congressional, and I think the presidential was somewhat less than that. But it'll be very interesting to see, and it's apples to oranges a little bit, but has the president's debate performance impacted things in Iowa? It's hard to believe that it hasn't, but you got a wild prediction on that heading in, or?
Maybe it won't have as much of a impact as we think, because don't you already have your mind made up? I mean, don't you already know what you're getting with both of those candidates, and love them or hate them or whatever? Like, I mean, what really surprises me, Chris, is that the mainstream media and some within the Democrat Party are coming out now and acknowledging it's a problem. Where for years here, it's been nothing to see here with the president's various gaffes and just sort of odd behavior. Now, when they can't deny it, they can't sweep it under the rug, all of a sudden this comes out. But I don't know if the voters were fooled all along.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I think that's a good point. How many undecided voters were there before the debate? I mean, the American people have decided whether they like Donald Trump or not. I mean, I think by and large decided whether or not they support more of President Biden and his administration. Yeah. But I think the key thing that remains to be seen and isn't talked about enough in the media is voter enthusiasm. How enthused are your voters to get up and get out and vote? And I think that's one thing that conservatives, Republicans didn't quite see coming in 2020 is just how enthused and motivated Biden voters were to get up and vote. Yeah. And it was the increase in turnout in places like Georgia and Arizona. And I'm not getting into the validity of the election results, but whatever the validity was, they had a lot of enthusiasm on their side.
Yep.
That's incontrovertible. But I think what's happening here is you're seeing a lot of disillusioned potential Biden voters. And that's just even among their committed voters, but it's that
Right.
marginal person on the sidelines. It's like, you know what? I'm tired. I'm going home. I don't need to go out and vote, or I'm not going to mess around with your absentee ballot because
Yep.
I think
I don't know
that's
how
the
that plays
part it's hard to measure, but it sure feels like there's a lot of motivation on the Republican side in this race.
Yeah.
But I've got two hot takes, and I don't know if we talked about this morning with regard to Biden and the debate. And is clearly the folks around President Biden in the White House have been misleading us on his mental condition.
The New York Times today came out with an article that said, 8 times in the last 8 months they've had a doc in the White House basically running Parkinson's tests on the president.
Well, now that was covered almost 8 months ago in conservative media and laughed off so that goes to my point. So the Biden White House and their accomplices in the media, and I'm talking mainstream media, if they lied to us about that, what else are they lying to us about? And that's not just with regard to President Biden and his qualifications to be the nominee or president. It goes to anything that they have been trying to tell us.
Hunter.
Yes.
I think we kind of proved the Hunter Biden laptop thing.
Correct.
That was a right-wing hoax until
right-wing hoax.
Couldn't deny it anymore.
All of these things. Can we go back and rethink what happened with COVID? How much of that? What else are they lying to us about? And I think it's time for a reckoning on all of that. And the other thing that needs to be kept in mind, and this has been reported, but if President Biden is not competent and not qualified or able to be the Democrat nominee for president, then he is not competent or qualified or able to continue serving as president.
Yep.
He doesn't get to do one or the other. He's got to step down. If it is decided that he is not up to the campaign, then he's not up to governing.
Yep.
So we'll see how that is. So, So ITR Foundation poll is coming up. I think I enjoy it more than anybody else, but
you enjoy it more than anybody else.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
but that's okay.
And you know what? If it just gives us content here on the podcast, then
totally worth
good.
it.
It is. I don't know if anybody enjoys it as much as I do, but I know there's people out there that enjoy it.
Well, I know people pay attention to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing. Look, as much fun as it is for me, it is. I think it's important work. We try very hard to have it be scientific, that it's not biased.
It does us no good,
right?
To put out something that's not accurate, or at least accurate as of the time when it was taken and the results were released.
If I wanted a poll that showed me that 80% of Iowans agree with every position, that's easy to do. We could skew the numbers and have it say whatever we want, but I'd rather actually know where they're at. So that's coming up as well. So since John's not here, we're not going to talk about UK and French elections.
Yep.
But it is interesting.
All I will say about that is, look, despite who won, or in France they came up with a weird coalition to fight off the far right. But what the Dems in this country want to call Donald Trump or ultra MAGA or extremism or whatever else, and they just want to blame Trump, scary orange man, on issues like immigration and inflation, which seem to be driving American voters. It clearly is having an impact across the pond on countries throughout Europe. And so, maybe the folks within America's left need to look in the mirror or look around and realize what's going on. Is where voters are going is not some MAGA-driven thing. Yeah. No, it's across because how do you explain what's going on throughout Europe? That's not Donald Trump.
I agree, but I also think I think that's a great point. And the other thing, especially with regard to what happened in France, which is everyone on, they got multiple parties across the political spectrum, but they all sort of teamed up to reject the populist Le Pen party because it was so scary to them.
Right.
And I think, maybe there's an analogy here that it's sort of that establishment uniparty that's going to circle the wagons for anybody that threatens the normal order. Yeah. And I think there's a corollary to what happens with Trump in the U.S., because Trump sort of sits aside of the normal Washington establishment, and they find him every bit as threatening to the normal order as they do the, just the Republican versus Democrat thing.
Yep.
You don't need to worry about the technical error here. That's the first time that's happened, but
Sure, it's fine then.
But I think it is a good warning that we probably need to land the airplane here. So
I want to put one plug in for John since he's not here, but certainly listening. I spent last week on vacation in Minnesota with my family, and I kind of get it. I kind of get why John wants to go up there so frequently. It was a great place. We had a fantastic time, and I get it. I'm not leaving Iowa. I'd still rather be here, but I get it. If you're from there and know which lakes to fish and everything else, like I get it.
Yeah, it is. I love Iowa. I love what it has to offer, but sometimes you have to look for it in ways that it sort of smacks you in the face in other places. And Minnesota it's a nice place. So we're going to continue to make fun of it. Don't get me wrong, but
I think once you get outside of the Twin Cities, Minnesotans and Iowans have a whole lot in common. So
I think that's absolutely right. Okay. Well, anyway, thanks for your time today, Chris. Thank you, listeners. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to tell your friends. And with all of that, we will see you next time on ITR Live.